800 people being sacked overnight. And that is a huge, I mean, there's a discussion, is that legal, is that not legal? Are they exploiting a loophole or not? We were supposed to be joined by Steve Headley. I can't actually see him at the moment. Steve, if you're there, can you raise your hand, perhaps? That's a slight problem. Okay, maybe we can talk about this a little bit with John, our own John Dunn. Could maybe introduce this briefly. Hi, John. I know you're not in the RMT, but I'm sure you've followed this case. Is this legal to sack people like that?
Well, allegedly it's not legal, but the thing is that the law doesn't exist to protect workers. It's there to protect their employers, and this is typical, you know, the anti-trade union legislation we've got, the attitude of rampant employers, fire and rehire, that the Tories voted down when it came before Parliament. All this has come home to roost in this, and I saw the BBC commenting on this, and their comment was, this is a PR disaster for P&O. A PR, what about the disaster for the people that have been thrown on the stones by a 3-minute recorded video from some chief executive saying, you know, you're dismissed instantly? It's absolutely disgusting that workers are treated like this. I had the great honour during our strike of sailing with the what was the Seamen's Union then, arranged by a fella who supported us, Henry Santamara, who was the convener down at Felixstowe for the seafarers. And it's not the glamorous job it's made out to be. These people work incredible hours, 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, sleeping on ships and things like that. It's, you know, it's awful. And the fact, the trade union movement, I don't know if the TUC have responded to this, if they've organised an online petition or a candlelit vigil or anything, but the P&O have got to be taken on. They've received millions in taxpayer handouts to keep them afloat, you know, to use a pun, and to treat workers like this. And we have to say, it's not the only instance of this. This has made national publicity, and the Tories are actually condemning them when they've enabled this shit. So yeah, I stand fully behind the RMT and the seafarers, and we've all got to show our solidarity on this, because they come for the P&O workers one day, they'll come for you the next.
I think that sounds about right. Hi, Ian Hodson, joining us from the Bakers Union. Thanks for coming on. Is this? I mean, this at first look, this looks like a bit like a cock up. You know, you kind of they're angling for big compensation there, or punishment, or penalty, or is this a part of a strategy to try and break union holds over these kind of issues, fire and rehire?
I think what P&O have done is union busting. I think without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, one of the disappointing things is watching all of these people try and make out this is something to do with the decision to leave the European Union. Let's make it absolutely clear. You know, this is not because Britain left the European Union. This is a P&O management decision about profit. It's about greed. It's absolutely nothing to do with membership of the European Union. And I contrast what P&O have done with actually, you know, what we experienced in 2012, which was obviously when Hovis decided that they would sack our members and replace them with 0-hour contract workers, and they could legally do it. You know, they could legally do it. So, I mean, we were in the European Union then, so it has absolutely nothing to do with the European Union and everything to do with profit. And that's the first thing, because what we need to understand is if P&O get away with this, then this is the next stage of the strategy about, making sure that workers have no rights whatsoever, and an employer can act in such a way and it become normalized. It won't even get a report on the TV anymore. It probably won't even get an inch in the local newspaper. I mean, so it's so important now that we do support the RMT union. We do call out the government for its failure to stand up for workers in this country. And actually, what the government should be talking about, and what Angela Rayner should have been saying, instead of saying about a gentle reminder, is we're gonna take over those P&O ferries in the national interests, and we're going to make sure that they're going to serve, in the way that they're supposed to serve, to make sure that they continue to deliver for the people who live on this island. And that's what the British government should do, not some wishy-washy nonsense about they can't intervene. They should take it over, nationalise it, and make it run in the interests of the British people that live on these islands. And that's how the government should respond. But of course, neither the Tories or the Labour Party are offering to do anything like that. But it's important that we get the message out there as a trade union movement about that's what needs to happen. Because if we don't start standing up for one another and then making sure people understand the reasons why, then this becomes normality. And I think it's critical now that we all come together as trade unions. And as John alluded to, I don't know what the TUC is doing. I know obviously they are supportive of the RMT, but it's not just about support now, it's about action. I mean, they need to do something. And I'm all in, I know it's classed as piracy, but I'm all in favour of occupying those boats personally.
On the issue of Brexit, that is interesting, and that a lot of people thought that that's the first instinct, but it's a loophole in the minimum wage legalization, isn't it? That international sea routes, you can pay people what you want, basically. And we're hearing it even years ago. People were employed on £1.80 an hour, which is outrageous. And doesn't that also sort of talk about the need for an international union movement where we actually don't undercut each other?
Well, absolutely. I mean, international solidarity has always been very, very important for the trade union movement. Obviously, we work with the SEIU on the mixed strike campaign, for example. Because there's no way we can take on a global corporation like McDonald's from the UK. And anybody who hasn't noticed, by the way, we just exposed the fact that they've just robbed us of another £295 million in tax avoidance. Because that's what these corporations do. They don't serve in our interest, no matter how they're portrayed on the television. And that's why trade unions do have to work together. And I'm under no illusion that the RMT has great links around the world, and rightly so. They've built those up over the years, and I'm certain that they will get support from the international trade union movement, and rightly so.
John, the P&O has been owned since 2019 by your favorite family, the family of Saudi Arabia. Do you think that might have something to do with, criticism? Apparently, the government knew this was going to happen at least a day in advance. They kept quiet about it, and they only spoke out after public backlash.
I remember when the Tories nationalised Rolls-Royce at a minute's notice, when that company was about to go under. And so, it's a demand we've got to make. And Ian's right, if that doesn't happen, these boats have got to be occupied.
And do you know if the RMT is planning that kind of action? What can we support?
I'm not sure yet. I was hoping Steve would be.
Yes, I was hoping.
But I suppose they dragged out. They'll be busy. They've got a dispute to fight, and the fact that they sent goons on with handcuffs to remove anybody that were occupying the ship. You were obviously meticulously planned, and hats off to the fella who's spoken out, who didn't know they were being set on as scabs, and actually walked away from it and exposed what had happened.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, that's the kind of solidarity we need, national, but also international, so that we're not undercutting us. Also joined by Matt Wrack now. Slowly. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us. Is this a reflection of union busting moves that are going to become more popular across the country, you think?
Well, I was down in Dover on at the protest the other day. I think it's shocking, and it will have shocked. It's clearly shocked millions of people around the country. But I think the problem is that it's not that surprising of how workers can be treated. This is just a reflection of the state of employment rights and trade union rights in the UK. It's easier to sack people in the UK than virtually anywhere across Europe. I had an exchange with Natalie Elphick, the Dover MP, when I was down there, pointing this out, and she responded, "No, it was just poor business practice that had created this this situation." I noticed that Louise Haigh, has made some positive comments in Parliament, but she said the issue was one of the issues was a lack of consultation. Well, I think any workers who've been through this knows that consultation is utterly meaningless unless you're able to back it up with trade union strength. So this highlights for us, first of all, the terrible state of employment rights for workers, particularly in the maritime industry, but also the appalling state of trade union rights. Why shouldn't workers be able to, first of all, take over ships if they're in that situation and occupy them legally and lawfully and have the right to do that until the issue is resolved? Secondly, why shouldn't workers across the country have the right to take solidarity action if we're outraged at this behaviour? Certainly the ports, why don't we have the legal right to shut down the ports? That's the way you would put the pressure on P&O. I understand there's going to be a debate in Parliament tomorrow. I don't hold out much hope that we can expect anything at all off the government, although clearly I think it's interesting that even Tories have had to come out with some crocodile tears, at least. I wouldn't trust them, but that they are criticising, although at the demonstration on Friday, Mick Lynch from the RMT reported that the minister was told the day before this was going to happen. So just reading the press this morning, there are various employment solicitors saying that P&O may have broken the law by failing to consult. Well, okay, that may be the case. I have to say, I'm not sure that compensation is the answer for workers who are sacked. What people want is the jobs and the right to a decent job. But what's the position for a government minister who possibly knew that an employer was going to act illegally and did nothing about it in the 24 hours before that illegal action was taken by the employer? So then there's a whole host of questions, and for me, the entire movement should be mobilising to support the P&O workers. That's what needs to happen. I think someone's just put in the chat that Section 188, which is the way by which you get notified. So the statutory forms that an employer has to complete when they are giving notice of redundancies, and I'm sure Ian's faced, and we've faced them, and we have faced fire and rehire in the fire service, and the only response we could find was to ballot for strike action. But I think the problem isn't that P&O may well have made a judgment that it is better to risk breaking the law and paying the fines and paying the compensation. That may be a business judgment that they have made. That they are willing to, because I'm sure they haven't blundered into. I suspect they haven't blundered into this. They'll have well-paid corporate lawyers who will have looked at all these risks, and despite that, they've decided to proceed, even to the degree, it seems, of telling the minister the day before what they were going to do. So that comes back to me is actually, in most such cases, what workers don't want is some redundancy payment. What workers want is the job. And a job for a long-term, secure, well-paid job, and that's the starting point. In a way, redundancies, and I suppose it goes back. You go back to debates we had in the 70s and 80s in the labour movement. There was a widespread opposition to any form of redundancy, compulsory or voluntary. Redundancies mean the jobs are going and either not replaced or replaced with something worse, and that should be the starting point for any battle for me.
I I think so as well. Appealing to the various laws is not going to get you your job back, or may help you survive in these very precarious times. Apparently, the government didn't just know about it; they also sanctioned it, saying, "Well, this is if that's what it takes to keep P&O in the country and keep it afloat, then we'll have to bite the bullet." And they changed their tune when every single paper came out with the P&O workers. Tosh McDonald is now also with us. Hi, what are your thoughts?
Hi, it's just on the P&O dispute. It just takes me back to 1988. I remember the same thing happening with P&O, and I remember the National Seamen's Union, as it was at the time, having its funds sequestrated, very similar to what the miners had done 4 years earlier. And I remember having to go down, because the funds were sequestrated, having to go down on the train, myself and another colleague. We actually took cash from the RM or NUR as it was, and ASLEF branches in Doncaster, down to Dover to hand over to the pickets. We were treated really well there. We were taken into it was just like being back in Yorkshire in 84, 85 strike. There was like cafes set up. We saw houses with scab painted on it. We were taken round. We were treated really well. But the point is that we have had a Labour government for 13 years of the time since 88, and the exact same actions are being taken by P&O now that were taken in 88. So we had, was it 14 years of a Labour government that never introduced legislation to stop this? Mm-hmm. What we've got to realise is Westminster isn't going to solve this, be it Labour, Tories or whoever. The way that will resolve this, like any other dispute, is going to be action, direct action taken by the members, and that's the way we have to move forward now.
There's also another line of attack against the unions, which is a new levy on membership income, which I think is going to put a lot of unions in dire straits. Ian, do you want to say something on that and explain what's behind that?
Obviously, government's doing everything it can to make sure that our members' money isn't invested in our members, but obviously in funding government bodies to police trade unions. Apparently, the reason for introducing it, this new person, is the fact that unfortunately not enough people complained about the unions, so therefore they've had to bring somebody in to look for those complaints, and if they haven't got any complaints, they can create the complaints and probably even make the complaints themselves to justify being able to then investigate us for not meeting some criteria that we probably didn't know existed at the time. But it's just another attack on the trade unions. It's another way to claw back money from our members' membership fees. It's about crippling us and stopping us from being able to organise and to recruit and to protect people in work and create the opportunity for more employers to act like P&O and British Gas, who did it last year, and Kellogg's, who have been doing it by the back end of last year. People consistently miss what these levies do to trade unions and how it takes their rights away. And how every attack on the trade union movement actually isn't an attack on the trade union movement. It's an attack on people, whether you're in a union or not, because it takes away your ability to improve your terms and conditions. And like I said before, hold companies to account, like McDonald's, who's just robbed the taxpayer of £295 million by shifting paper from one country to another, and then obviously being able to avoid that tax, but still get you, the taxpayer, to fund them during a COVID crisis, and actually when they're still making billions of dollars a year, and you have to fund their workers through your taxes, which is why, obviously, they don't want us to be in a position financially to be able to speak out about them.
Mm. So Matt, to get that right, the unions have to pay a levy to pay somebody in case somebody complains against the unions. That seems a very, very odd thing.
Yeah, it's worth just dwelling on it a little bit. So the certification officer is supposedly the regulator for the trade union sector. And I just ask people to think about this. You know, trade unions are voluntary organisations. So workers come together voluntarily to join a union, to form a union. It's our money, our members pay for that union. We determine our rules, and they will differ across unions. But in this particular case, the state steps in and says, actually, we're going to we will appoint an external regulator with there's various requirements. So unions have to provide very detailed returns every year to the certification officer, and you can see that on the certification officer's website. And then you already have this bizarre system whereby, you know, we've got complaints rules in our union. I'm sure most unions have. If a member has a problem, there are ways through the union structure in which they can raise that. But this allows people to go externally and allow a third party to determine matters of union rules. So how would the union rules be interpreted? To me, that's a matter for the union and the union alone. If you want to determine what the Fire Brigade Union's rules are and how they should be interpreted, frankly, join the Fire Brigade Union. If you've not, it's none of your business. But that's the position. And now they're taking it a step further, where in order to enable this body to continue, they will actually make us pay for the laws being used against us. It's totally shocking.
And Matt, Labour's come out in sort of solidarity with the P&O strikers ish. Does that convince you that perhaps the FBU should stay affiliated to Labour? Does that make a strong case?
Well, look, at our conference, we've got two positions that are going. There is a motion coming for disaffiliation, and there is a motion, a statement from the executive which doesn't support disaffiliations. My personal view is we should not. However, I think the anger is such that I don't know what way our conference will go. It may vote to disaffiliate. I don't know. I think the problem for Labour is they've been all over the place on trade unions. I think many Labour MPs and Labour leadership, frankly, don't understand trade unions, don't understand what they're about. Most people in Parliament, there's very few who've come through a trade union background or through any ordinary life in working in the world of work. And as was said earlier, you know, we had the new Labour government when actually Labour did absolutely nothing to improve workers' rights. So that when the coalition came in, and we ended up with new anti-union legislation, they were starting off from where Thatcher Major left off. Whereas if Labour had repealed even some of the anti-union legislation, we would have been in a better position. They could, of course, have repealed all of it, but they didn't touch it at all. So Labour has not got a great record. We made some big progress under Jeremy Corbyn, and you know, some of that is still in place as Labour policy, and there's going to be a battle over whether Labour sticks to that position or not, as there always is on Labour Party policy issues.
I mean, as you say, I think unions have a political role to play, and that's hugely important. And the question, of course, is if you leave the Labour Party, you know, how can you use your political voice? And maybe Ian, the Bakers Union has left the Labour Party. How is it planning on using its political voice?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, as our union, it wasn't there at the time, obviously, but we founded the Labour Party to create the opportunity to deliver democracy for people. Obviously, we failed. It was failed, and that's part of the reasons why we've left the Labour Party. I mean, our position is actually it's getting back out onto the streets and talking to people about the issues that they face and listening to the stories of hardship they've got, and then creating the opportunity to build political power in those communities by working together with other organisations to actually talk about how things can be different and how by working together we can make that change. Because, you know, quite clearly, I mean, obviously the Labour Party and certainly this Labour Party that we have now is not the vehicle to deliver democracy. They can't even deliver it for themselves or provide rights for their own workers. So they're the last party I'd take at face value when they talk about supporting the PO workers, because they've just done something similar themselves in the way that they've conducted themselves by sacking their workers, and now are actually looking for volunteers to take up their jobs. So I think, you know, democracy will be great. Democracy will be great at some point. The Labour Party isn't the vehicle for it. I do think trade unions have to think about, you know, the future of the labour movement and its political trajectory. I think it's very, very important that the unions do come together because we're quite clearly not being politically represented now. And the sooner we understand that we've got to mobilise collectively together to build a better future for all of our people in our communities, the sooner we get a party that represents our interests and not just that of big business.
Is the Bakers Union considering using its political fund to support any of the non-Labour candidates or organisations that have sprung up recently?
We will support members who stand for any political organisation, as long as those political organisations are in line with our policies. So we won't be supporting anybody who stood for the Tories or the EDL or any of those parties. But obviously those parties that are in line with the serving the interests of the same people that we do, we will support our members for standing there. I mean, obviously we're working quite closely with Chris Stevens, for example. You know, we would probably donate to Chris Stevens. I mean, we will still support people like John McDonald, but we will support Jeremy Corbyn if he stands, you know. So, I mean, we are quite clear that our approach is that we have a number of people that we will support, and we have people who we most certainly won't support. Mm-hmm. And we will campaign for other organisations, yeah. I mean, that was over supporting Dave Nellis, and, you know, he ran a great campaign. Obviously, you know, I think next time he'll have a better opportunity to do better than he did this time.
That is the question, isn't it? How much can you actually, achieve with the first past the post system, which is hugely undemocratic? It's very, very difficult to actually build a political alternative to the Labour Party. Matt, if Jeremy Corbyn stands as an independent in the next general election, would that make you change your mind about, support? If you support him, of course, that would mean you get chucked out of the Labour Party.
Yeah, which is obviously how the RMT ended up being expelled in the past. I think it's something that would have to be considered very carefully. I think that my own assessment would be that if Jeremy Corbyn stood, he would win such a campaign. I think people would have to think through very carefully, and there'd have to be discussions with Jeremy and his supporters, if he were to do that, about what supporters, including affiliated unions, should do. Because I think there is a big strategic question of whether you would want 2, 3 or 4 unions to be expelled from the Labour Party. It's a big step to take. And I suppose the question that would arise is, what is the purpose of that? Because, on the question of disaffiliation, it does immediately, to me, raise the question of what are the politics of the Labour movement? The creation of the Labour Party was a step forward for workers' representation. It recognised in whatever way, a confused way perhaps, that workers have different political interests to the bosses. And that is the base. That's why it was called the Labour Party. To simply disaffiliate, and I'm not saying this is the Baker's position, but to simply disaffiliate, that there are also right-wing elements in the trade union movement who want disaffiliation because they want non-political trade unionism. And I think workers need a political party. They need political representatives in Parliament who will fight for their interests. And so this is a very, very deep debate that we're having, what we're touching on here. There's a lot more to be said on it.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to put a lot of unions in some difficult positions whenever the next general election is. So solidarity, I think we have to, we're calling on all comrades to join the various strikes and the various protests that are going on with the P&O workers. And thank you all 3 or 4 for joining us.